Welcome to the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Sara Gross, Ironman champion, PhD in women's history, and founder and CEO of Feisty Media. I started this show because I wanted to cut through the BS of diet culture and fitness culture and actually learn from high-achieving women at the top of their game who have figured out how to feel and perform their best at every stage of life. So I chat with experts, elite athletes, and leaders who have learned to succeed despite the massive gender data gap in exercise and medical science and product development. Every episode is filled with information, advice, and anecdotes that will help you fulfill your potential as an athlete, mom, leader, or business owner. And listen up. If you don't subscribe to our Women's Performance newsletter, you are definitely missing out. It's totally free. So head over to womensperformance.com and subscribe now. That's womensperformance.com. This podcast is a production of Feisty Media. Hi, and welcome to the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast. I hope that the final throes of summer are going well for you and you are as active and feisty as ever. Today's episode is one that I've been visioning for a while. I really wanted to take a deep dive into the various methods of birth control and how they affect our physical and sports performance as women. As you can imagine, finding the right person with the right knowledge on this topic was difficult. But as always, if you put something out there, often the right thing comes back to you. And in this case, the right thing, quote unquote, came in the form of Allison Campbell, our guest today. I met Allison at the Female Athlete Conference in Boston earlier in the year. And when she told me she was doing her PhD on a topic related to birth control and athletes, I immediately asked her to join me on the podcast, and today is the day. Allison tells us about the research she is doing, how hormonal contraceptives affect us as active women. We talk about our own experiences with hormonal birth control, and also what she recommends for athletes and active women. Allison, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast today. We met a couple weeks ago in Boston at the Female Athlete Conference. Did you enjoy the conference as much as I did?
Oh my gosh, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to chat today. And yeah, every time someone asks me about how the conference went, it's just amazing, awesome. I'm running out of descriptors to convey just how great of an experience it was. I think, especially being surrounded by such inspiring and motivating researchers and clinicians, but also that very encouraging at the same time. So it was so easy to go up to people and chat, and everyone was really encouraging about my work when I opened up to them. So I think it was just such a positive atmosphere where I learned so much too at the same time. So that was super cool.
Amazing. What are some of the main things that you would say that you learned? Like, as someone who's kind of immersed in these types of topics all the time, was there anything surprising or that you learned?
Oh yeah, I think it's funny because and I'm sure we'll definitely get into my research area.
We definitely will. Yeah.
But I think that for me, it's largely the stuff that's kind of adjacent to what I'm doing, where it's like I'm interested in the physiology side of things, but I also have a passion for kind of the socio-cultural side of things. And so being able to sit and listen to some of the talks, particularly the intersectionality panel, where we're able to have discussions about things like using inclusive language in sport, especially that's such an issue. And I know, kind of disclaimer kind of for this episode is that my work is physiology based, so we tend to stick with sex, male and female, because we're talking about female hormones and those assigned female at birth. And at the same time, sport is quite binary as well, obviously, with men and women or boy and girl categories. And so discussing things that we can do to kind of make both sport and science the most inclusive space possible just gets my mind churning and excited for kind of where we're going. So.
Totally. Okay. And I'm going to ask about your research and your PhD work, but I want to know first, like, are you an athlete yourself? Where did this interest in exercise physiology sort of come from?
Yeah, I I hesitate to define myself as an athlete right now because I don't know if recreational adult dodgeball counts as.
Oh, it totally counts. Yeah. You do
But yeah,
recreational adult dodgeball? There's like a league?
yeah, there's actually
In
multiple
Vancouver?
leagues in Vancouver.
Wow.
And yeah, we've been in for a couple of seasons, a group of friends, co-ed group, and yeah, it's fun. We all so to kind of backtrack to actually answer your question, yes, I grew up as an athlete, started off with swimming and soccer, and then kind of evolved those two into what became my sport, which was water polo. So
Right.
that love the team sport aspect, love being in the water. So as soon as I found the sport, I kind of fell in love and yeah, played all throughout high school, played with the junior national team in Canada for a couple of years, and then went on to the University of Maryland and Indiana University, where I played in college.
Wow. I bet you're good at, oh, that's why you'd be good at dodgeball. Because
So
you don't have to
the
like tread water while you're throwing the ball. You can just whack it straight at someone.
dodgeball team is all former water polo players and their respective spouses.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And then at what point did you sort of become more interested in the exercise physiology piece specifically?
Yeah, I think it started as I was getting into college and trying to decide what I wanted to do. Biology 12 was my favorite course, which here in BC is largely human anatomy and physiology focused. And that was always my favorite. And I kind of thought, well, I really like that class. I really like sports. I'll major in kinesiology. That seems to make sense. So that's where I started for my undergrad degree. And the program at Maryland was really great because it gave a very broad look at kinesiology. I think a lot of the times when we think of kinesiology, we think of, strength and conditioning, and we think of physiotherapy or athletic training, and more of like kind of the musculoskeletal side of things, which honestly is what I thought when I signed up for the degree. But I was able to take courses like, biomechanics, exercise physiology, and then the sociocultural side. So the sociology of sport, history of sport were actually required courses for me to take.
Wow. I love
And
that.
so like that kind of developed that passion for that side of things as well. And funnily enough, exercise physiology was not my best course in my undergrad, but then went on to do my master's in exercise physiology and kind of really fell in love with being in the lab and working with athletes on that side of things. But yeah, since I started pretty much since high school, I was volunteer coaching in that side of things. So I was involved in kind of working with athletes and being an athlete myself. But then kind of combining that like love of sport and the physiology in the lab was really cool. And I think that's why I maybe didn't do as well in my undergrad, because it's so theoretical. And then once you get in the lab, when you're doing your grad work, it's a lot easier to kind of get into it.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So tell us about your PhD project that you have on the go right now, right? You're working on it
for
now.
sure. So yeah, I'm PhD candidate at SFU, Simon Fraser University, in Burnaby, British Columbia. And I am co-supervised by Dr. Anita Cote at Trinity Western and Dr. Victoria Clayton here at SFU. And we're looking at female athletes and their cardiac structure and function and athletic performance through different hormonal profiles. So we're looking at things like changes with puberty, changes throughout the menstrual cycle, and changes with hormonal contraceptive use.
Wow. Okay. That sounds like a huge topic. I mean, because, we often talk about like female physiology and how it's like, I don't know. I don't want to like continue the myth that it's like, we're more complicated than men, but like there's like a lot of life stages. There's a lot of like our hormonal profiles look different if we're in different phases of life or if we're on, hormonal contraceptives. Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, so cardiac, so that has to do with like cardio training, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So specifically in Anita's lab, we use echocardiography to assess the structure and function of the heart. So we're doing ultrasound imaging to get a good idea of how your heart is functioning. So we can do basic measures like stroke volume, so how much blood is being ejected to your heart, out of your heart each beat. We can measure the thickness and the mass of your heart. And then we can also do some more advanced calculations that look at how the heart is moving and functioning based on kind of how it twists and contracts and that sort of thing.
Right. Okay. So are you finding connections then between various like life stages for women or places in their hormone cycle where things are different, or the use of contraceptives?
So we haven't quite got into testing in the lab with my projects yet. So check in after the next female athlete conference, and maybe I'll have some results on that side of things. But what we have started doing is my first project I wanted to kind of assess the reproductive health landscape among Canadian athletes. So we did a survey. Actually, we are still doing a survey. It's still open. So any athletes out there interested,
can you send us a link?
I can definitely send you a link, and that would be kind of any level of competitive athlete. We'd love to hear from people about what they're doing, because we really want the research to be informed by the athlete themselves, the participants themselves, and not just measuring things that we think might be interesting, but we want to find answers for athletes. And I know the answers that I wanted when I was an athlete, but that might have changed. That was, again, a long time ago that I stopped playing water polo. So I think that by gathering that information, so things like, when did you start your period? How regular are your periods? How long are they? What kind of symptoms do you experience? What kind of contraception are you taking? Were you given options when you were prescribed a hormonal contraceptive by your doctor? What motivates you to take it? That sort of thing. So kind of trying to combine the physiology of it and kind of the situation, or the more qualitative side that the athletes are in making these decisions.
Right. So you said that there were answers you wanted as an athlete. What were your sort of longstanding questions or things that you experienced?
I think just the main would be, and we've heard this because we asked athletes what they want to know is, what is the best type of contraceptive for me to be using as an athlete? Is there anything that's going to impede my performance? And I think that was it. That was me in particular. I knew. So I personally, after a lot of trial and error, ended up on an IUD, a hormonal IUD. And for me, that felt like it was the best option, but I didn't know, whether that affected my heart function. I don't know if that affects my vascular function or my VO2 levels, that sort of thing. So I think that not so much, is this going to help me, but is this going to hinder me? Kind of flipping it on not so much using it as an ergogenic aid, but and I think from what we've heard so far, I think that might be the case for a lot of people, but
that hormonal contraceptives might be hindering more than they're helping. Is that?
Well, not so much that's what the athletes want to know if they are, right? So like,
I see. That's the main question. Is this holding me back?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Endurance sports should be accessible to everyone, right? That's why we are so excited to be partnering with Motive. Motive is one of the fastest growing training apps in the world today, with thousands of amateur athletes signing up every month and a nearly perfect 4.9 star rating in the App Store. You are not a template, and your training plan should not be either. Prepare for running races, triathlons, cycling events, duathlons, or swim runs, however your season schedule shapes up, and get training written by some of the best coaches in the world in each discipline who know what it takes to help amateur athletes reach their goal on race day. The app takes the training written by those experts and then creates the most optimal training plan for your schedule, abilities, and goals. Plus, the training is fully customized to your race schedule, how much you can train each week, your current abilities, and the goals you want to achieve in your race. You can use the app for free as long as you want, or get all the upgraded features from the app for just $19.99 a month. But as a Feisty listener, you can sign up at mymotive.com and use the code Feisty for 2 months of full premium access. That's right, you get 2 months of premium for free. So you quite literally have nothing to lose. So head over to mymotive.com, MYMOTTIV.com, and use the code FEISTY, FEISTY. And on a personal note, I know the founder of Motive, and he is driven to make triathlon and all endurance sports more accessible for the athletes who care about their performance, but who aren't quite ready for a full-time personal coach. If that sounds like you, definitely try the app for 2 months for free. You literally have nothing to lose. As we head into summer, rest and recovery are critical for improving sports performance, reducing stress, and living a long and healthy life. We should all invest in better sleep. So, think about the thing you lay your head on for 8 hours a night. If it's not exactly right for you, it can lead to needless tossing and turning, or worse, have you waking up with an unrelenting kink in your neck. My new Lagoon pillow has helped me improve my sleep immensely by pairing me with the performance pillow that has everything I need. So I personally was matched with the Otter pillow. Shout out to Team Otter, which I love because it has a gentle cooling effect. And I was able to choose how much stuffing I wanted in it, which is super important to me because I'm doing a decent amount of CrossFit these days and my shoulders are kind of creaky. So having a pillow that is stuffed just to the right height keeps my neck and head in exactly the right position and comfortable for the entire night. And as of fall 2023, Lagoon launched their 100% mulberry silk pillowcases. It's cool to the touch, buttery soft, and great for your skin and hair. You've got to go check out this pillowcase if you want to feel great and look great every morning. Waking up for morning workouts has never felt better. I'm refreshed and pain-free thanks to my Lagoon pillow. To check it out for yourself, go to lagoonsleep.com/performance and take the 2-minute sleep quiz to find your perfect pillow match. And then use the code PERFORMANCE for 15% off your first purchase. That's code PERFORMANCE at lagoonsleep.com/performance, whole 15% off, and the link is in the show notes. You can just click through there. For decades, running shoes have been researched, tested, and designed for men. Brands have relied on the shrink it and pink it approach to sell male shoes to female customers. That's why we are so excited to be working with Hedas. Hedas designs athletic footwear for women that elevates performance, safety, and style. Hedas unlocks the science behind women's biomechanics through dedicated research, creates better shoes for women that support their longevity and performance, and establishes new design standards to promote transparency in a male-biased industry. Hedas have a lower ankle collar to reduce rubbing, a breathable mesh toe box to allow for ventilation and to allow for female toe shape, a special kind of plate in the midsole to keep tired legs going, a narrow heel cup to reduce heel slippage and take the pressure off our Achilles, and a rounded instep to create a snug fit. Hedas has 3 shoe models designed for different sessions: the Alma Cruise for long runs, the Alma Tempo for training days, and the Alma Speed for pushing the pace. I've personally been running in the Alma Cruise and I love them. It's the shoe I always wanted and never knew I needed. The fit is perfect in every way. You can get your own pair of Hedas at hedas.com and use the code FEISTY20 for 20% off. That's FEISTY20 at hedas.com, and it will all be in the show notes. So can you just, for our audience, outline like the various types of contraceptives?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of the times when someone says birth control, often the first thing that comes to mind is the pill. And most people are, if they're taking a hormonal contraceptives, because of course there are hormonal methods and non-hormonal methods. So I'll back up a little bit there. So your non-hormonal methods, things like barrier methods. So both external and internal condoms, and things like the diaphragm, which I think is a lot less common now than it used to be, or non-hormonal IUDs, which is the IUD that has copper. So usually when I talk about the IUD, I'm talking about the hormonal one, just as an aside there. But yes, and then when we're talking about hormonal methods, usually we think about the pill or oral contraceptives. Most people are on those, but the other methods are rising. So we can kind of divide them into two groups. We have our short-acting reversible contraceptives, or SARC, S-A-R-C methods, or LARC methods, long-acting reversible contraceptives. So our short-actings are things like vaginal rings, the dermal patch, the patch of hormones that goes on your skin, and then our long-acting reversible contraceptives are our hormonal IUDs, and then I believe the brand name is Nexplanon, the arm implant, which it's a hormonal long-acting method as well. Just, I think, approved in Canada back in 2020. So we can kind of divide them into those groups there.
Okay. And do you think that the hormonal contraceptives affect exercise performance? Is there a working theory, I guess, is kind of what I'm asking.
So as far as where we're at, as far as knowledge on the topic right now, there was a meta-analysis done back in 2020, and they looked at just specifically oral contraceptives, because again, easier to find participants with that because it's the most common type. And they found a trivial decrease in performance in those that are using oral contraceptives compared to those that are not. They then went on to highlight that a lot of the research in this area is towards the lower end of the quality scale, and publish also methodological recommendations going forward to conducting research with female athletes, so that we can look into this deeper to see, whether there is an effect that we're not seeing, or there's something that's getting washed out due to the difference in quality.
Right.
I believe of all the studies in the meta-analysis. So that's when we compile a bunch of different research papers on one topic and actually take the data and analyze the results together as a group. I believe one, maybe two of them were randomized control trials, where they had people that weren't taking them and then either gave them a placebo or an oral contraceptive pill, and then assess the differences. And they did find a small difference there. But I think the main thing is that, again, that lack of a hindrance is the one thing. And coming from the survey, it seems that a lot of people are using it not because they're, again, think that it will help them, but they think that their period symptoms will hurt them, or it's more about managing the symptoms and managing, like knowing when you're going to menstruate. Or in the case of the hormonal IUD, a lot of people don't menstruate at all with that method. So you don't even have to worry about, like, if it's game day, if it's race day, and you've got your period, because you don't have one. And I think that that's why I'm really interested in diving into that, because it's like, that seems like a huge benefit to me. It was a huge benefit to me as an athlete of not having to worry about that. And someone that suffered pretty severe symptoms with my period, that was great to not have to worry about migraines and cramps and nausea and potentially having to perform. But at the same time, maybe there's something going on physiology that I'm not aware of. And so to be able to like find an answer there is kind of what drives me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So did you use a hormonal IUD to stop those symptoms yourself, of like kind of your menstrual symptoms? Is that?
Yeah. So my journey with contraceptives started on the pill, as most people do.
Yeah.
And that actually made them worse.
That
made my symptoms worse.
Yeah.
And then my doctor prescribed, and actually this was one of the ones I forgot to mention, the shot. So it's kind of in between short acting and long acting, because most of them it's like the pills you take for 3 weeks and you stop. The vaginal ring, 3 weeks, and then you stop. There are some that you can cycle as well. But the shot, at least when I was taking it, was every 3 months. So a little bit longer, a little less kind of daily needing to keep up with it and that sort of thing. But But there are some issues with that when it comes to bone mineral density. My doctor at the time wasn't worried about it for me so much because I was also doing more load-bearing sports as well. But I think that's becoming less of a choice. You also have to get an injection every 3 months. And so I think the ease of the IUD, that kind of like set it and forget it type method that honestly, I learned about in a health class in university. I didn't know that that was not an option to me. I took a women's health class, and I'm so glad I did, because I think that coupling that with my interest in exercise physiology and athletes is kind of what put me on the path that I'm on now, where it's like, oh, I'm a 22-year-old woman, and I had no idea that this was an option for me. And then I went to my doctor, who actually, the doctor that I started with, he retired. A new younger doctor that may be a little bit more aware of current recommendations and that sort of thing was like, yeah, I think that'd be a great fit for you. So yeah, I think that for me, it was like, oh, this is ideal. I don't have to, especially like in a water sport, like having to deal with like having your period when you're playing, and, you know, meetings after the game where you're still sitting in your suit and you're like worrying, like you have to have your teammates check, like, oh gosh, am I leaking? Like wrapping the towel around yourself. Like it's just this, again, the social cultural side, that it's like, it's not just the physiology, it's, you got to think about what's going on with the athlete as a whole. And I think for me, that like finding the answers to like the best contraception in that context is important.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I mean, I think sometimes we underestimate like the difference that birth control has made in the lives of women broadly. Like probably a part of the reason that we're able to like participate in sports throughout our lives is that we're actually able to control when and why and how and with whom we have a baby, right? And so it's like this interesting connection to go like, it's very quick. Like sometimes we're very quick to assume that that's always been there, you know, but like it's not that long ago when like women didn't have those choices, you know. So it's a kind of like it's like a revolution for women. And it was, right?
And I think that sometimes, and I know that there's a large push now on social media, like, oh, don't put any hormones in your body, hormones are bad. And well, I think it merits investigation, because obviously I've been doing the research, but that again, that liberty and that freedom that gave to people that are assigned female at birth, that you can dictate when and if you want to carry a child is huge. I mean, especially in the context of everything that's going on today with reproductive rights, that it's so important not to forget that we kind of don't exist in vacuums as like, I'm not doing research with cells in a petri dish. They're human beings that have to go about the world and live their lives. So
and I also like kind of like you. I'm a bit older than you, but you know, I wish like I started on a low dose hormone IUD when I was 40, and I had just retired from professional sport. And now looking back, like I had by that time, you know, I'm 47 now. That was 7 years ago. I had a lot of friends who were still doing like Ironman triathlon professionally or triathlon professionally. And everyone was kind of migrating to the low dose hormone IUD, partially because of what you said, like knowing, like actually a lot of people then stopped getting a period. Right. Which helps so many people. Right. And also I would have loved to have the opportunity to test the theory that like, I think it reduced my symptoms. So like even those couple days before getting my period, I'd be super flat in training. Like, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to race on those days. I wasn't going to be able to race well, I should say, on those days, just because something was going on. Still don't know what, that like with my hormones, that wouldn't allow me to do that. And so I feel like a lot of those symptoms were kind of like flattened, right? Or kind of reduced, I guess is the right word. And how close are we? Like, what's the state of research? How close are we to having those kind of answers that female athletes might want?
I think being at the conference in Boston, like there's so many people all across the world doing so many great research right now. And I feel like, I don't know, just by the energy in the room, I feel like with stuff like that, we're on the cusp. Like, I think the big thing too is, and kind of linking back to talking about the quality of the research, because people have been studying female athletes. They don't, Anthony Hackney at UNC had a couple talks at the conference, and I've heard him speak a couple times before, and mentioned that, this isn't new. People have been studying this for a while. I think there's a tendency that because there is more attention on the research right now, that there is a lot of people that came before us. We certainly stand on the shoulders of giants, and but I think that when we talk about the quality of the research, the big thing is the funding. That if you're talking about controlling for the menstrual cycle, that's or testing at different phases of the menstrual cycle. That's a number of different time points where you want to capture different hormonal profiles. That's a number of different times that you have to bring participants in and hopefully compensate them for their time. That's materials that you need to use. That's your time, and research in the health sphere across the board is underfunded in women. There's more and more papers coming out each day, whether it's you're researching female health outcomes or female sports science outcomes. If you are a woman in science doing research as a PI or as a person applying for this funding. So I think that the push, and there is more opportunities now specifically looking into women's research and female athlete research that will help. But I think that's the big piece is the funding, and that
right.
I think the floodgates I think are close to opening, and I mean hopefully I can be a part of that. But yeah, I think it's I'd love there to be answers soon.
Yeah. More answers soon, please.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this study that came out. It actually came out the week of the conference, I think. And I was kind of surprised that, the main stage panel about contraceptives, that they didn't mention this.
Yeah.
And partially like it's personal for me because this was my experience, but I definitely had an experience of being on the pill essentially and having a mood change. Right. And not really realizing it happened twice in my life. And so like the second time I was on the pill, I realized that, oh, this is what's causing my depression. Right. Like the first time I was like diagnosed with clinical depression, went to counseling. And I look back on that now, like when I was around 19, 20, and I think, was that just the pill? Because the second time I went on the pill, it was very obvious. Right. It was like what changed a couple months into being on the pill. I asked myself, like, what did I do? Why am I suddenly feeling depressed? And depressed, like when I say that, I mean like really that feeling of like something switched in my brain and I went from being a happy person to not being a happy person, and what happened. And then I went off the pill and it stopped. And so I saw this study and was like, oh, finally, like they've linked, the pill to depression in some people. What do you think of it? Do you see that study, and what did you think about it?
Yeah, I took it, like you sent it my way. And actually, I think I remember we were chatting about that at the conference as well.
I was talking to everybody about it because I was like, have you seen it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I would say fortunately that I, had when I was in high school, my relationship with my mental health kind of started a little bit later in life as far as the issues that I currently dealing with anxiety. But so I didn't have that personal experience as far as the kind of relationship with hormonal contraception and mental health, and whether it's depression or anxiety or any other mood disorder. But I think it's one of those things where, and people always bring up the trials of like male birth control, that it's like, oh, it gets shut down because there are so many side effects. And which is like, it's so infuriating. But at the same time, the reason is because they don't have any side effects to pregnancy, because they don't get pregnant. And so you have to, like, these things are evaluated at your like baseline level if you're not taking them. And so I think like, especially with, a lot of people experience mental health issues during pregnancy and postpartum as well. And so that's why, not that it's okay, but I think that's why that a lot of these things we don't know about them, because it's like, well, yeah, I guess like people might experience that, but they also might experience it pregnant. And so like, right. I think now we're finally coming around to like, and maybe it might be spurred a little bit by the fact that like, okay, well, like the balancing act between like who's responsible for contraception of like, okay, if we have to deal with this, like, let's look into this a little bit more and make sure that, we're protecting people. And again, like talking through their options with them, because that was one thing that has come out so far about the survey, is that like a lot of athletes, or people in general, I would assume, aren't really having a conversation with their doctor, or they don't really know how to have a conversation with their doctor because they're not being given options. They say, hey, I want to go on birth control. And to the doctor, that means the pill, and they get their prescription and they go off. And there's no conversation of like, and asking. And I'm hoping that the way doctors are being trained now, that like those are questions that you're asking, not just like, oh, are you taking it regularly? Do you have any worse like cramps, or how's your cramps, how's your bleeding? That it's like the mental health check should be in there as well, because maybe we can find a method that works better for you, or maybe non-hormonal is what's best for you. But I think it's one of those things that kind of has to be, first people have to be informed, and then doctors have to be informed to have those conversations with their patients as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said about the people aren't being informed. Like that was exactly my experience. Like when I was 16 years old, I don't know why I end up with these tests. I must have had some symptoms, and I had a hormone panel done, whatever that is. And it came out that like my testosterone was like just above what female normal is, which now when I look at those numbers online, I'm like, it still was like nowhere near, like the male numbers are like way up, like slightly above, shouldn't even be a concern to anyone. It should be like, great, you might be slightly better at sports or something, right? Like, but instead I was 16, the doctor put me on birth control, right? And then I think I had all kinds of crazy symptoms because it was, I think, and obviously like the pills were different back then,
and there's so many different kinds.
Yeah, like I must have had a higher dose. I must have had a pretty high dose pill, I would guess, because I know they've got lower kind of over the decades since then. But like I was like started lactating, like yeah, like I was producing like milk from my breasts.
Wow.
And then the depression, which I didn't connect.
Yeah.
Right. And then we changed the pill and the depression stayed, and I stopped producing milk. But like it's like, it seems weird. Like, how did that even get, and I remember having to bring it up, like having to go, so mom,
yeah,
like, I think I'm having a side effect to that I'm producing milk. Like,
yeah.
What a weird thing to have to do as a 16-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like that education piece is so important. And now that I found like that low dose IUD that just works so well, I'm like, I know that it's changed a lot since then, but why didn't we know about this?
Yeah, for sure.
So what would you, like, based on everything that you've kind of seen and learned, what would you suggest for athletes who are looking for birth control and like potentially looking for something? I mean, we went over a few, actually, there's a few things we talked about there, because one, as they brought up at the conference, like being pregnant affects your performance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, what, if you don't want to get pregnant, birth control is a great idea. And then second, like you have that question of how your birth control is going to affect your performance, right? And then you have the third part, which is like how you could potentially use birth control to control what's happening with your cycle, so that you know that you're going to hit a certain part of the month and on race day or game day or whatever that is. Like, what do you suggest for athletes?
I think that across the board, that it's just a very individualized approach. So like you said, there's all these factors that you need to consider. A lot of athletes, I think pregnancy prevention still is a strong concern. And so with a method like an IUD or the arm implant, where they're highly, highly effective, that's great. But maybe, and here I'm touting the advantages of the IUD, because I've had a positive experience.
Same. So we're like an IUD positive podcast right now.
I know I know people that it didn't work out for them.
Yeah.
And the insertion is not a pleasant experience. And that's another thing, as far as taking women's pain seriously, that, that procedure should be anesthetized. A lot of the time it's not. And so that could be a cause for concern for people, and that's okay too. And then, you get into the like performance / period management. Again, that it just depends on what you're looking for. And then again, like kind of tying to the pregnancy prevention, that it depends who you're having sex with, and whether it's in a monogamous situation. So there might be some female athletes that are having sex with women and still are on an IUD for that period management piece. Conversely, if you are in I guess not so much conversely, but if you are in a non-monogamous situation, barrier methods are still very important.
Right.
I'm super interested in what the hormones do to your physiology, but also STI rates are through the roof now. So and I think because we get that, like, oh yes, I'm not going to get pregnant, I have this IUD, this method is so effective. It's like, okay, but also there are other concerns out there as well. So making sure
having
that,
an STI could affect your performance.
exactly. Do you need a round of antibiotics? To treat an STI, that could pull you down. So yeah, that's certainly something to take into account. It might not be, like, a condom might not be your only method, but yeah, taking that into consideration as well. But yeah, so it's very much get in, and my advice would be, and there's a website out there that I learned about in this women's health class, and anytime anyone asks me, it's bedsider.org, and they break down kind of all of the kind of positives, negatives, considerations for all methods of contraception, so not just hormonal methods. And I would encourage people to read and try to figure out where you think might be the best one for you, and then have that conversation with your doctor. You might have an older doctor that, there was a type of IUD that is literally no longer on the market anymore, that got recalled, that it had some issues with it, but that type doesn't exist anymore. But maybe they were trained at a time where those issues were going on, and so they're hesitant to recommend them. There's still a lot of physicians that are hesitant to recommend them to people that haven't had children, because they think that, like, it might cause issues there, where that's not really a known concern at this time.
Right.
And so I think that being empowered to seek out that information and show up as much as you can, having a direction, because if you show up, it's kind of fully dependent on the physician that you speak to, on, like, they might steer you one way or another as well. And also might not have, if you're just seeing your GP that might not have any experience with athletes, that might not even cross their mind that it's a consideration for you to, maybe they're just thinking pregnancy prevention, and you're just like, okay, well, I have concerns with managing my symptoms for sport, or whatever it might be related to you being an athlete.
Yeah. And a lot of GPs, when I can guess from having been to see doctors as an athlete, might not necessarily take that seriously. Right. Like, oh, you're concerned, like, they're only concerned about, like, preventative, or they're concerned about, like, your health and, like, making sure that whatever, like, band-aiding your problem or whatever that is. They're like, but wait, what? Like, you want to not have a period so that you can be better at sports? Like,
yeah,
I can see that, like, not everyone's kind of in that
yes, definitely
frame of mind. It feels like, and we've concluded this in a number of different episodes on the podcast, that, like, you really do have to be a study of one, like N=1 kind of with yourself. And I know that frustrates some people, because talking to a friend of mine the other day, she's like, I can't be a study of N=1. Like, I can't tell what's going on with my body. I don't know. It makes me feel like I'm failing. But, like, what you just said there, I really liked about, like, the quality of information, knowing, and we'll put that website that you mentioned in the show notes. Because if I think back to, like, 16-year-old me, if someone had said, okay, here's a list of potential side effects of this pill that we're putting you on, come back to me. Let's talk about this in a month. Come back to me. Let's, and if there'd been a system in place for that, like, let's have follow-up, or talk to your mom if that's happening, and then we can talk about it, then, like, the problem would have been resolved much more quickly. Right. And I think that that's true. Same thing as an athlete. I think I would have found that low dose progesterone IUD that's working so well for me now, a lot sooner. I would have helped my athletic career as well. So yeah, I'm definitely it's frustrating that we don't have like an answer for people, but I don't know, like, do you think that we ever will? Like, we're never going to get a one size fits all answer, obviously, but do you think we'll have like a kind of a deck of answers?
Yeah, I think the goal would be just like expanding that body of information for people to make decisions for themselves. Because again, it's like I think oftentimes science in general, you get that one soundbite or that one headline of like, this affects this. And it's often ran with in kind of the general population. But that, it might affect this, but again, you are not in the lab as a participant all the time. Like you're out, you're living your life, and there are a lot of things that factor into these decisions. And so, as much as we can provide that information to people to make decisions for themselves, inform decisions for themselves, I think is the goal. So yeah, that card deck of information is like, or a flow chart of information of like, is this a concern for you? Yes, like this method, or no, it's not. Okay. And go on to the next question. I think would be kind of like the ideal situation.
Yeah. And the flow chart kind of maybe, thanks to people like yourself who are doing the research, like the flow chart might just get more and more robust as time goes on. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing.
As opposed to, are you sexually active? Are you concerned about getting pregnant? Here's a pill.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Allison, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thanks for the work that you do. Is there somewhere we can follow you or your work?
Yeah, I am on Twitter, at AJ spelled out. So AJAY Campbell, on Twitter. I was super active on Twitter in like my undergrad, but like nothing important to say. And now I'm like wheeling my way back into it, although I might not be on there for long. We'll see how it goes, but it's just such a valuable tool to connect with other academics, athletes, that sort of thing. So, yeah, hopefully the website doesn't implode, but
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Allison.
Great. Take care.
As a lifelong runner and triathlete turned CrossFitter, I am stoked to announce that the athletic eyewear brand Tifosi Optics has joined us as a partner here at Feisty Media. Tifosi sports glasses hit all the marks for athletes. They're shatterproof polybicarbonate, so the lenses not only reduce glare, but also offer scratch resistance, which I 100% need. They stay in place when you are moving. The hydrophilic rubber nose pads actually get more grippy the more you sweat, so they are secure and don't slide down your face even when you're running in hot conditions. No matter what sport you do, Tifosi has shades for you. Whether you love tennis, fishing, pickleball, running, cycling, or just hanging out on the beach. They are super reasonably priced, which I love, so I can have multiple pairs that go with any outfit. And of course, Feisty listeners get a special discount. So head on over to tifosioptics.com and use the code FM20. FM as in Feisty Media to get 20% off your order. That's FM20 at tifosioptics.com. I'll put a link in the show notes to make it easy for you. Building muscle can be tough, and gains can be so slow, even for those of us who do a lot of strength training. As an ex-endurance athlete who is now in perimenopause, I know this all too well. It can be frustrating to put in the time in the gym and not see the results I'm looking for. That's why it's super important to take the right supplements at the right time. One of those supplements is essential amino acids, which are needed to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis happens when you eat high-quality protein, like eggs or whey. And by supplementing with additional essential amino acids, you can make sure you are getting the full benefit of your training sessions. targeted essential amino acid formulas can be up to 4 times more effective than just eating protein. I've been taking amino acids for almost a year, and in combination with eating quality protein and a couple other supplements, I have managed to turn the tides on age-related muscle loss, which starts at 30 for women, by the way, and I have continued to make strength gains as I head towards 50. AminoCo has been a long-time sponsor of Feisty Media and has supported all of our brands and podcasts over the years. I recommend starting with AminoCo Perform, and you can grab some at aminoco.com/performance. If you enter the code PERFORMANCE, you will save 30% and receive a free gift if it is your first purchase. Give it a try and let me know how it goes. That's aminoco.com/performance and use the code PERFORMANCE to save 30%.